I'm always down to talk baseball, but like I'm so far removed from that world and life now that I don't even know who's playing or what's playing. In fact, my parents, they're getting older. They're not old, but they're getting older. They're in their mid to late 70s and they're very healthy and fun and active. But I think they're at a point in their life where they're like, okay, time to let go of some of this clutter and some of this shit. So we'll send it to our children. And
Yeah.
I just got stuff on I just got shipped some stuff and I got it like on Monday and I'm just going through this. There's all this old school stuff,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
an old Beckett
Yeah,
guide,
right, yeah, absolutely.
collecting
Boy,
stuff.
I mean,
Obviously, Toronto roots,
sure, sure,
Toronto
sure,
Blue
sure.
Jays.
Yeah, no,
There's just a myriad of crap here.
as a Braves guy, I've got my issues, I mean, we're about the same age. I'm a couple years older than you, but yeah, no, we've got I've still got some scarring from Toronto, on my heart, but it's all right. It's all right.
Was it 92, 93, somewhere around there?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well,
But you,
that was the Phillies that you guys took in that one, I believe. The one Carter walked it off.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I think
Wasn't
that
it the
was
year before it
the
was the
year
Braves?
before, I think, was the Braves. Yeah, yeah. Or maybe after. I don't know. It was like the Yankees a handful of times, the Blue Jays once, and we got the Indians. That was the only one we got in that whole stretch of my you know, also ran traumatic childhood of Braves fandom.
Well, what's awesome is you did give the world the gift of the tomahawk chop, and to this day, I still remember that. It was unreal. It came out of nowhere, and I felt like you could not remember it.
It was, it was really, it was really emotional, and impactful, and then that was back when we used to have cultural moments. Like everybody had seen the game that the night before when you saw them the next day, and it was intense. And then, I mean, I understand why it's troublesome, because it does come from kind of a John Wayne era kind of racist meme about, Native Americans and stuff. So my idea, and so my idea for the Braves, which I've pitched to several people, but nobody's taken me up on yet, is that we change our name to the Hammers for Hank Aaron, the Atlanta Hammers,
Nice.
and then you do some partnership with Home Depot or Lowe's. You give out foam big hammers that they could still swing. And then instead of the I mean, instead of that thing, you have Hey Ya, a couple, outcast Atlanta artist, and then that's what you do when it's 3-1, or when you got you got a man on second and third, and you're down one. You everybody does the hammer. Whatever. That's just that's my idea for it.
That's a cool
Solve
idea.
everybody's problems, and you don't have to change any of the important shit. Anyway.
I think that that's so apt, and I am a big believer that there's been a lot that's been lost in the last 10, 20 years societally. Humanity hasn't been lost per se, but like we've forgotten that what matters is our character. Everything's been like changed to this person said that, this person said that, that's what they mean, that's who they are. It's like, no, you don't know how I show up every day. You don't know the hours and things that I put in. Plus, I'm a flawed human, so I will err and make mistakes, but I can atone for those. So it
For sure.
doesn't mean it's right or wrong to do one thing or another. You should talk about it. You should hear opposing views.
Sure. And nothing's permanent. I mean, I've believed uh several different things that all contradict each other, when I was given new evidence, and try to be open-minded, and I mean, I think that you start from a place of assuming that the other person, I mean, you might not be right, but I tend to assume that the person I'm talking to wants peace, prosperity, and for the safety of them and the people they love. I
100%.
now and then I think there have been thousands of pages and hundreds of libraries filled up with how to do that.
Mhm.
And there's many ways as there have been people, probably. So I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I think that most people have good intentions until they get to, you know, I think about $100 million is where brains break or like some childhood trauma. I think that if you have $100 million and you're not, constantly trying to figure out how you can make the world a better place,
Yeah.
then you have there's something wrong in your mind. Some type of chemical imbalance or spiritual imbalance or mental imbalance. I don't know.
Yeah.
But most of the people I talk to, be they, people that came up learning from certain schools, which are older and older and older than what the Republican and Democratic Party have been in, the years I've been alive. These ideas and have their benefits and their flaws, and they've
Yeah.
been demonstrated throughout thousands of years of history, and I don't have any kind of solution other than individual. I think the solution to our problems is a musical one, honestly, because um and I've thought a lot about it. I think a lot about, economics, politics, justice, things like that. Write about it and things like that. And maybe this is a little coat because it's what I do, and I want to feel
Mhm.
better about how I'm able to pitch in, because I can't go ride on a flotilla and fight oppressive armies by myself. And I wouldn't be very effective at doing it anyway. But I mean, the truth of it is that all of our problems stem from a lack of empathy, which is a lack of connection. And at least for me, I don't feel that there's a better solution to that than going to see a band play.
There's, I mean, you said a lot in there, but for some reason, you reminded me of Offspring's album, The Smash. There's like a musical interlude. I think it's the musical interlude or it's intro outro, but there's this random, narrator with this deep, sexy voice. And he's like, after all, music soothes even the most savage of beasts,
That's it.
and music is such an important connecting force. There's something much more grandiose about music vibration, like the harmony that holds the fabric of this universe together. I believe. I don't know what that is, like you.
Yeah.
Um,
It, I think people have called it the Tao plenty of times. I think we get it mistaken for something like God, but it's definitely the sound that's made. Might just be the corona of the sun. I mean, we take for granted how big that motherfucker is and how close it
yeah,
is and how impactful in our life it is. But I mean, look, just recently, I mean, I think that you have to stretch it out and you have to back up and look at things historically when you're talking about these ideas. But when you're talking about people that want to control what's
yeah.
going on and control the communication and control the information, well, what are two of the biggest things that have happened just in the last year? The Trump Kennedy Center, that whole controversy. I mean, whether it makes a lot of money on the bottom of a spreadsheet, people that know what's going on know how important it is, know how impactful the arts can be,
Mhm.
and then the whole Bad Bunny versus Turning Point halftime show, I mean, look at how important people found that to be. Music
Yeah,
still has a deep cut on us, but when it comes down to the independent artist and things like that, like, I mean, it's just going to have to be a subsidy.
yeah.
There's going to have to be some type of subsidization. I'm lucky that I have a way to make an income away from doing this, but but I do it because it's important. I don't do it because I think I'll be famous or make money. I do it because I think that this is the fight between good and evil, is to create more music and create important music. Because the weapons manufacturers are running Spotify now, for fuck's sake. So
You know what's funny is, like, I feel like these issues go back hundreds, if not thousands of years, so as much as they're prevalent now, it's not like it's anything new. Maybe it's more overt, maybe it's being sped up, I don't know, but, you said something
kings and the
before about
emperors used to cut the tongues out of the minstrels that sang critical songs about them.
yeah. You said something important earlier about, like, position. And I've referenced this guy before. When I moved to Vancouver during COVID, I was trying to find any place that would be open or let me to go in, especially music related. And there was this awesome record shop that was more a tinkering lab than a record shop. You walked in, there's all these like record players and hi-fi systems that this old gay German guy who smoked like a chimney was just constantly fixing. I loved meeting him and getting to know him. And one day we were talking politics, and I was like telling him about my opinion. And he said, "Listen, don't ever have opinions." And he was in his 70s, so respect your elders, learn from other people. He said, "I've learned to have positions and only positions because you might talk to Afton and you might disagree with this or you might agree with this, but you'll come out with like 1%, 10%, some kind of a shift for you, which is your position on that idea or topic changing." And you said it before, right? Like, how many times in life have we contradicted ourselves because we believe this and then we believe the other? So why do we now so fervently or adamantly say this and this or not this, as opposed to what do you think? Help me
Right,
understand
exactly.
why
Well,
I'm right or wrong.
yeah, one of my favorites is one of my favorite authors and writers and thinkers is Robert Anton Wilson, and he studied a lot of like uh, what he called guerrilla ontology and general semantics. You know what I mean? As a philosophy person yourself, my other degree was in neuroscience and physics. So I mean, I was those are like the things that you're just thinking, it's just
Yeah,
thinking because you can only you get so far to bedrock. And language is definitely a part of it, it is. It's that you have to be so precise. And I guess, you can put it in with like the four agreements thing, but when you think about it on a deep kind of scientific level of actually saying what's true, then what's really true, what is, if you use English prime and try to take the word is out of every sentence, because every time you say something is something, there's an inherent contradiction in that sentence already, immediately, you know?
mhm,
Instead of saying something, one step in the right direction, I can't do the whole E prime thing, but it's like my nervous system processes the following information that I experience as this and gives me an emotional reaction that is this. You
yeah,
know, and that's not even completely true, but it's miles closer than saying this guy is an asshole.
100%. And we'll constantly see things in life that shift that. Like a really stupid example for me, I've kind of always been open-minded. I grew up Eastern European parents who weren't religious, but were spiritual in the sense that, you can believe in whatever you want. You should be good for goodness sake, study hard, be good, contribute to society, whatever, but have fun along the way. I remember I think it was late university, or maybe it was just after university. It's just an example. So for me, this has nothing to do with how I feel. It has to do with more of the idea of accepting the fact that there will always be anomalies, so be open to everything. It was an American Dad episode, and the lead character, he falls like in love with this other dude. They have the best bromance ever, and they're like, hunting and playing guitar, and like they're doing everything. And they're both Republicans, and they're like so linked up. But then all of a sudden, the friend is
Nope.
gay.
Sold to oh, that's not the one where he sells his soul to Satan.
No, 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 no. But the friend,
There's
the
one
friend
where
is gay.
Stan makes best friends with a guy who ends up being a Satanist. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Maybe it's the same one, but there was definitely one where there was the gay Republican, I believe. I remember the Satanist one too. And at the end of the day,
Yeah,
he's like,
yeah,
the moral of the story is, why would you judge someone or
right,
pigeonhole them if they're like this? Also, just because you're this doesn't mean you're not that. You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, there was a yeah. No, I remember one of the I'm a huge American Dad fan. I think it's probably the most underrated cartoon ever, and I understand why, because I think Family Guy got really tired really fast, and it
Mm.
was sophomoric by like the third time you'd seen an episode. You're like, okay, these are dudes making fart jokes. It's funny. Uh, but what Mike Henry did with American Dad, it's wildly underrated. But it started off at a very political angle, and there was that
Yeah.
episode where they were the log cabin Republicans, where Stan was. Yeah, yeah, that's an old one. I'll have to rewatch that one.
It's
Uh,
a good show. I mean,
it's crazy how consistently brilliant that show has been, and it's only gotten better.
it's it's funny. It reminds me of something that I learned over the last 5 years, that everything is everything and everything is nothing. So like you can apply so much meaning to something if you want to, but it
That's it.
doesn't have to be that way. So hold on. So speaking, let me segue because I feel like
Uh,
you and I would just go
yeah,
on a
yeah, I
tangent.
can go on that. I can go on that tangent forever too,
Well,
especially
so
during the Olympics. Like when you really think about, you're watching the Olympics and you think, "Wow, there's a place in Slovakia where curling is the most important thing in the world to these 12 people." So
yeah.
anyway, yeah, go segue. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean we talked about philosophy and position, and man, I want to kind of get into your music and your
Oh,
background and your story because it's fascinating. So, a new way of thinking is never easy is one of the lines that I saw, I think, in the press release, or actually, sorry, that your publicist sent me.
yeah.
And I was finalizing notes for this, and I thought it was unreal. Like, what are the coincidences, philosophical, esoteric, which you like? What are the coincidences that this is the last day of the year of the snake and we're having this conversation?
That's beautiful. That's perfect. And I was not aware of that. So thank you very much. That's great.
Today is the last, tomorrow's the horse. Today's
Excellent.
the tail
Yes.
of the
We get
tail.
on the horse. Okay. That hey, there's been a lot of magic spells, and I don't know. I would hate to take too much responsibility for any of them being too impactful with the way the last year's gone. Uh, but hopefully, it's a sign of things to change. That would be cool. There's some things I wouldn't mind changing.
Well, why don't we get into some of the ideology behind this most recent album, the 2025 album. There's the number 13, which comes up a lot, which I'm a huge fan of, and I can talk about, what it is to me.
Yeah.
Um, but oh man, I had a point and I lost it. So why don't we go over to the album? I'll come back to it.
Sure. Well, the album kind of came about. I mean, there was, I don't know. Some of it was kind of high minded, and some of it, I'm happy to admit, was a little low minded and egotistical. Um, I do think about what my catalog will look like if anybody ever looks at it in the future. And the last couple of things that I had released, where I was included on a wonderful tribute to David Olney. And before that, I released a cover of Dead Flowers with the brilliant Jamie Harris, which I'm very proud of. And then before that, I had recorded an EP or mini album. I don't know what 7 songs is. I think that's kind of I don't think they have a name for that yet. So
Right
we
here,
can
yeah.
coin that anytime we want to. A 7P, whatever. But I had recorded 7 songs, a mini album of my father-in-law songs. So there's a part of me that was like, okay, I'm starting to become like kind of the Pat Boone of unknown Americana artist, just singing other people's songs. I wanted to put my own stuff out, and I had some written. And then I was like, well, I've got a lot written, and if I'm going to do this, I want to make it a big deal. I want to do something that's like really, really heady and really deliberate. And it was around that time that I found out about the constellation Ophiuchus, which is, like I studied some astronomy and stuff like that, and I've always kind of had a peripheral interest of the esoteric. I've got tarot cards on my arm, and I'm perfectly willing to admit that there's much more to the universe than the dogmatic materialist will let me have to
Mm.
finish my math homework. But uh I do think that there's a gap between materialism and spiritualism that just seems to be not close enough to be a synapse yet. So in kind of a conceptual effort to bring those two together, I wanted to combine the zodiac with the actual astronomy of the stars as their position now. Sidereal astrology is what some a wonderful hippie girl in New Orleans on last year on tour told me it was called. But so with that in mind, I set out to release these 13 songs and put them lined up every release with the exact date that the sun crossed into the next constellation. And I set out to do this and made a plan to do it and started doing it before I'd even written the rest of the album yet. Just kind of a leap of faith, kind of knowing myself that I'd find a way to get it done because I just do when I think something's a cool idea. I usually try to find. I'm usually able to find a way to get it done, no matter what debt it costs me or how bad it hurts my hips or ears. But so yeah, so we started with what I've always been told was my sign, Sagittarius, but the sun doesn't go into Sagittarius until till December 18th, I think, 17th, 18th. So that was when the first song came out, and then I just was running my face off all year last year trying to get this thing put out in time and let a few people know. And then the wonderful Cora Lee, who did illustrations for each one of them, that I still want to find something grand to do with that. I think that releasing the album with it was relatively grand, but those images are just so beautiful that I don't know, maybe I can make some money or, start a religion. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I'm resting right now from it all. But yeah, it all concluded when the sun went into what I now know is the constellation that the sun travels through during my birthday, Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. And so I wrote a song about that because the mythology on Ophiuchus or Asclepius or several other cultures have named the constellation different things, but there's always a serpent involved. There's usually some type of healing, medicine, poison, that kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write
Talk
a little mythology about that.
let me jump in. So talk to me. I'm gonna drop a couple of fun facts, but then drop on me why 13, right? 'Cause I actually don't know the story behind the 13 zodiacs and the potential 13. For me, 13's always been like rebirth and a new cycle, all right? It's almost like the phoenix coming up after the end of a cycle. Um, I also am into a certain amount of astrology and astronomy. I actually, for the last few years, uh, have been following this British lady named Pam Gregory. I discovered her during the pandemic, and she's just so much fun to watch. And she made it very clear that a lot of this stuff lines up. And in fact, some elites, some big investors, etc., might use astrology to plan their lives, their investments, etc. It's weird that the planetary alignment that's happening right now, or that has just happened, or is that about to happen, is the 250th anniversary of the American end of the American Civil War, and we're going now into the year of the fire horse, the war horse, the metaphor of Aries, of all these things. I feel like there is revolutionary like energy that's bubbling and people are starting to speak out more. Epstein files just dropped. There's a lot of change and shakeup happening. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's much
it's a
more than
weird time.
coincidence.
It's a very intense time, and but I think of it. Another thing. It's the amount of information I think that is making it feel so intense because I mean, while all times have kind of been unprecedented, like this is crazy, right? The doubling of information is to a point now to where it's probably fractal, and you have this AI, and it really is kind of unknown where that's going to go. I think that we can kind of conceptually grasp where it is now, but it's moving so fast. The 13 comes from just the fact that that's how many constellations that the sun went through, which I don't think is a coincidence. I think there's some apophenia to it, but um, yeah, no, I mean I agree. There's something afoot. Some kind of big change is going to have to happen. It's
Yeah.
I just don't think that and you can kind of see it in the way that some of these cretins are kind of playing their hands, like they're playing like they know they don't have much time left, you know.
100%.
Um, and I don't think they do. I hope they don't. We'll see.
If someone is not good and someone doesn't want to accept truth or accept the humility of having to say mea culpa, I'm wrong, I fucked up, here I am, whatever, they're most of the time going to go down swinging. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Oh
they're
yeah.
they're just gonna not accept it.
You know,
They're gonna stay in their dishonesty and they're gonna fight until the bitter end, which is a shame. Uh, Another funny anecdote. So that same lady, Pam, she was saying that the way things are lining up, 2030, 2032, a lot of people see um, a new dawn of man, a new renaissance, by the people, for the people is going to build up now. There'll be a groundswell of activity, and then we're going to go into this new golden age. And it's funny because many other people, Elon Musk included, love him, hate him, I don't care. It's just the point. They're saying that the AI is going to bring about radical change to the point where jobs are going to become more and more obsolete, and that people will be able to focus on their lives and their creation rather than the 9 to 5 grind. And it's almost weird that we have this push towards that. And then you have the Pam Gregory's of the world saying that 2030 we're going to see that. What if we do go into an era in our lifetime where it's like, what did you do today? I woke up, spent some time with my loved ones, I made some music, and I went to bed. That'd be kind of nice. And it would make it such a prolific time for people like you to go just heavy into the creation, into the arts.
it'd be beautiful. I mean, first and foremost, we have to take care of the people that don't have any shoes on their feet, don't have any food in their mouth. The people that are living in tents in the freezing rain and having bombs dropped on them. I mean, we got to, there's a Maslowian thing, and I think it goes through our entire species, right? Like we can't progress as a species until we can take care of the least of these. And that goes
Yeah.
back to biblical times, but it's also just a fundamental thing. I think that, I mean, what you're talking about was what they used to talk about in like the Industrial Revolution. Henry Ford and all those thinkers there, they were like, oh, the assembly line is going to create so much leisure for the common man.
Mm,
Well, and then war and war and war and war. And then it became this individualistic kind of, you got to work 70 hours a week to be to success in the society. And now it's
yeah.
kind of, I mean, you got to have a side hustle now for, to really hang on. Like you got to have two jobs, and we're still not putting the food on the, food in the mouths of the least of these, or the, people not having socks and stuff. So, 5 years is a long way down the road, as we know. I mean, I could have never in a million years guessed what would have happened over just this last year. I would have never
Yeah.
that I'd see the kind of shit that I'm seeing. So I have no idea what 5 years will bring. But I do think that Martin Luther King was right when he says the arc of history is long and it leads towards justice. And if things are accelerating as fast as they are, then maybe, I mean, what we've got right now are these like competing counter revolutions between corporate oligarchs. One set of corporate oligarchs wins power for a little while in the center left, and then, they get demonized by this other group of corporate oligarchs in the center right, and
Hmm.
it's just this reaction keeps widening out further and further and further until we end up with what the situation we are now. It's that normalization of deviancy and things like that. So, maybe the backlash to that will be such that we do have some type of intellectual reformation. We are
Yeah.
long overdue for a good old fashioned reformation. We just don't need it to be a Protestant one or a religious one or a political one. We need a spiritual, empathetic reformation. And
Yeah.
maybe we're getting close to that. I think that that's what music is about. I think that's what these kinds of conversations are about.
Absolutely. Learning and growing together, passing, sharing information and wisdom and knowledge, then that doesn't always work for everyone. Like every culture is different, every society is different. You can't just apply this over there. You have to learn and grow and work
Humans different.
together.
Yeah.
My
mean,
My parents,
me and my brother are very different. And
same.
we couldn't be more demographically similar. We have the same parents. You know, we lived in the same town. Other than a 2.5 year difference in age, we
Yeah,
are demographically the same person, but we could not be more different in our personalities, our taste, our reactions to things, our emotions. Like, you don't know what straw, what butterfly wing flap is going to alter your personality forever when you're 4 years old, you know, like who you're going to meet, what teacher is going to send you down a completely different path than the guy standing right next to you, you know?
100%. I had this idea in the gym, like, I don't know, 15-ish years ago. I was on a treadmill and I looked at a sign and it was like just one of those, overbearing gym signs in a small condominium where it was like, be mindful of this and like, clean everything. It was just almost passive aggressive in the way that it was written, but this line there, something about cooperation. For some reason, I started to think about cooperation, and my parents, my families, they fled communism. They fled, Russian invasions into former Czechoslovakia. They were there through Nazi invasions. There was both sides of like the horrible right leadership, and I'm not saying I have the answers, and I'm not saying one political ideology is better, or even democracy, like, has been kind of changed from what you and I read in Plato's Republic, right? Like, it's so different now. But what if the answer is this idea of by the people for the people, where it's not socialism, but it's a community of cooperators, people who help each other out?
Well, it's decentralization, right? I mean,
Yes.
you know, one of the many problems that has happened with our current landscape of media in information processing and dissemination has been that, you know, we tend now, like, there aren't cultural moments, but does seem to be a cultural politics, you know, and these cultural issues are debated on such a central stage that it really makes it untenable. Like, the
Mhm.
culture of New Hampshire is not the same as the culture of Texas. It's not the same as the culture of Afghanistan or the culture of Venezuela. And this assumption that one culture is superior to the others, you know, I mean, I think that there are some objective things that we can say, hey, you guys really need to move past the human sacrifice or the female castration or, you know, the open
Yeah.
slave markets. Like, we can say that and, you know, maybe even put some pressures on them and stuff. But I mean, in the long run of time, like you say, what is it? 250 years or
Yep.
150 years?
250. Yeah.
250 since the American Revolution, not the Civil War, right? Civil
I
War is
think it was the
1860.
yeah.
So Civil War would be, yeah, Civil War is about 100 and 150, whatever. Anyway, 150 years on the just in the short time that humans have been here. We've only been rid of slavery for 150 years. That's not to say slavery is good. It's certainly not. But I'm just saying, like, we shouldn't judge other cultures quite so harshly when they're a little bit behind. You know, we should help them move forward. But otherwise, it's like, you know, if your culture is, I don't know, I'm going to get myself in trouble. I already have. You got to edit all this out. Uh, this is going to go viral here. Like, I mean, you know,
No, 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 it's
trying to
all
get
good. We've
into,
already established that conversation is king.
yeah, but you try to get into something nuanced, and I mean, even in an hour-long conversation, like, I mean, these are such grand, you know, ideas that are coming that we're talking about here. But I mean, the point being that, yeah, I mean, culture has to be relative, and then you decentralize things so that people have a chance to figure it out and live together and and hold each other more accountable. There's just so many benefits to decentralizing things, and there's so many benefits to centralizing things. You know, I mean, there has to be a balance, but it's just the same
Mhm.
with, you know, I mean. Capitalism has demonstrably been great for reducing poverty, you know,
Yeah,
but it's also been demonstrably, you know, uh, deteriorative to like our character as a species. Like, we can see that now that like
yeah,
billionaires are rewarded for being shitheads, you know? So there's a balance. I mean, there's obviously good to social programs and taking care of the least, the having a social safety net, having services like roads and firemen and police, and it's better when that's centralized by competent people. But you know, centralizing everything leads to your Stalins and your Mao
Yeah.
Zedongs and things like that, you know?
Yeah.
So it like Buddha said, it's the middle path to all of it is, try to start from yourself and try not to get pushed too far this way or too far that way on anything,
Mhm.
be it your political beliefs or just your desire for French fries, just
Yeah.
try to stay away from that. I don't know. But maybe, that's the answer that works for me because I'm, in Mississippi, we were brought up to believe in the Dharma, and
Yeah.
we were taught Buddhism every Sunday morning by an angry preacher in
Wait,
Petal,
hold on,
Mississippi.
hold on, hold on, because now I got questions. I got questions,
I
but
was
I
just
agree with what you said. Like it comes down to balance. It comes down to the conversation with yourself, a conversation with you. And it took me 43 years to really start to go inwards properly because I wasn't taught that before. I wasn't really like aware of the different things I could do for myself to be better for everyone else. We are so fixated on the outside, the
right,
money, the obsessions, the power, the 9 to 5, whatever it is, we don't slow down and ask ourselves, who am I? What is life about?
right,
And I think the middle road is important. A lot of people don't even know that a middle road is an option. I mean, you
right,
mentioned like the billionaires and getting rewarded for being bad. I agree. There's a lot of that, but I'll also counter that there there are a lot of decamillionaires, 100 millionaires who are relatively unknown or obscure because they're good people who have lived like these hard lives and worked hard and created and developed this stuff, but they don't want to be associated with anything. They don't want to be a part of that. They just want to go, like you said, and be left alone and have a beer at the end of the day. Uh, and they're not bad people. I don't know what they're doing or how they're running their companies, but there's always a counterbalance to
oh,
everything.
totally. Oh, totally. I mean, like I said, I think that, I don't know, I couldn't put a exact figure on what the number is, but
Yeah.
there's a number where, if you have that much money and you're not giving it all away at that point, I think there's something kind of like just off in your head. Maybe not in your soul or character, but just like, you've got an identification with this external thing that is not you, which is wealth.
Mhm.
Wealth is not you. I mean, we're barely even our own minds and bodies. If you really dig down into it, we're certainly not our possessions,
100%.
uh, or our, net worth or status or anything like that. So, I think that at a certain point, there is something that is a disorder more than, like a villainy. But yeah, no, it's, I was lucky when I was in college to get introduced to Eastern philosophy. And I think that it answers so many of these questions. Like I love the Western philosophy dig down into it. But Western philosophy ends up in nihilism every time. I mean, if you follow it to its ultimate end, you end up with like what is the Irish deer Zapfa's philosophy, where our consciousness is killing us because it's weighing us down. It's no, it's just realize that everything is changing and that your attachment to anything, whether it be your own thoughts, whether it be the things out there, it's natural. Your
Yeah.
ego is natural. It's an evolutionary tool, otherwise I wouldn't know which mouth to put the coffee into. But
Yeah.
you want to try to keep it as minimal as possible if you really want to feel connected to the true universe, which is the Tao, and it's thousands and thousands of years, and that's one of those things that another problem with the dissemination of information is everybody thinks history started, you know, the last time their YouTube video came on,
Yeah.
I think history started in 2020 or, 2018, whatever the conversation is, there's a myopia that restricts our understanding of how long this is
Yeah.
going on. And I mean, even the scientists that study this stuff to the core only have a great guess of what, like a few trillion years or something, but they don't know.
Yeah.
It's a relatively meaningless thing. For all we know, it's been going on forever. It'll keep going on forever, and the worst of it will pass, will come again, will pass, will come again.
That's why conversation and education are the most important of all things, because we don't know what we know until we know more, or vice versa, right? Like,
Right.
history, they say, is written by the winners. So how do we know history if we didn't get the other side of the story? We need the full picture. Yeah, I
Well,
was watching
that's
this.
a part of it, right? People keep saying history is written by the winners, and maybe that's. I mean, there's certainly a truth to that, but it just incentivizes people to write history faster and faster,
Mm,
to be like, okay, well, that's what happened, and that's what's true. It's like, okay, wait, well, we could talk more about it, and there's more evidence. There's other things that will come to light. There are people that have an incentive to hide the things that they've done, and there are people that haven't had a chance to explain their side, all those kinds of things. So we're trying to write the history so damn fast that we move on to the next thing. The news cycle part. I mean, I think that's a
100%.
part of it.
Well, and so for me, even that saying is open to interpretation. For me, when I say that, I'm thinking like it's written by the winners in the sense that you could be someone bad and you won the war, but
So
because you won, you're putting your perspective on that, even though that might not be like what happened. A great example for me was, I'm I come from Jewish lineage, and we of the last 50 years, 100 years really think of the Holocaust as one of the greatest atrocities in human history. I'm watching an Anthony Bourdain episode about the Congo, and they start to talk statistics and facts, and then you realize what happened in the Congo with the Dutch and the invasions was like 4 to 10 times worse than the Holocaust, and you're like, "Okay, hold on. Why haven't I heard about this before? And how
right,
many other times has something like this happened?" So what is actually the word? Not that one is, not bad or not, but like,
right.
what is the
No,
story?
it's how you're going to take the gold medal away from Hitler. Uh, uh,
Well, clearly someone did, as
yeah.
horrible as that was.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, it's not spoken about a lot. How many people Stalin killed? It's not spoken about a lot. How many Mao Zedong killed? They killed a lot.
Yeah,
Uh, America, just the founding of this country. I mean, how many millions of people died it's not countable. The way Hitler did it was particularly cruel, and Eisenhower's idea to send cameramen over there when they were doing it all made it more impactful than ever, right? Because then you could bring it back and you could say, this is what this shit looks like.
yeah,
There was nobody down there with cameras and video cameras in the Congo, and that makes a difference. You know, you look at, I mean, 70 years of apartheid in Palestine, and now that they're live streaming the genocide, people are watching. It's there's a way. I mean, the civil rights movement didn't get kicked off until people started seeing what uh George Wallace was doing with hosing people down in the streets of Birmingham.
yeah,
So, I mean, that visceral connection to information, the more of that we have, there's a benefit. But at the same time, our brains are overflowing because we were meant to, make up stories about the stars as we sat out in the grasslands. We weren't meant to be staring at these phones. Our ability to intake information technologically, I think, is outpaced our ability to intake it psychologically, mentally, and emotionally. We don't know how to deal with it, and it's turning into kind of a numbness, and
yeah,
that's where you have to be really careful. I mean, we're just doing spiritual psychotherapy now, but I mean, that leads to, you need to meditate more because you have to strengthen your attention, because attention is the most powerful force on in the universe as far as we know. It turns light from a wave into a particle. Like, our nervous system does that to shit that's not even like inside us. We just do it with
yeah.
our minds. So
It's
that and
it's
And if you're not
It's
paying
wild.
attention to your attention, then somebody else is.
100%. Intention's everything. And I think that you made like a really good point about, coming full circle back to the beginning of the conversation, information, knowledge, right? That the knowledge is power, and it's you have to have the power to find the knowledge, to understand the knowledge, to digest it, to know which knowledge to look into, to have the knowledge to actually look at other knowledge bases to make
Right.
sure that if someone's trying to like restrict or diminish your knowledge or take it away, that you're aware of that too. There's so many pieces to that puzzle. I did find it funny that you mentioned nihilism because I frequently reference Nietzsche, who famously said, "Without music, life would be a mistake."
That's it.
And here we are.
Yeah, that's it. Nietzsche, that's one of my favorite quotes of his. For all of his kind of gruffness, he understood that beauty was what it was about, or at least, like you said, he understood that he could put the meaning on whatever he wanted to.
Mhm.
If he wanted to put the meaning on dogma and rituals and things like that, then he could do that and he could find God there. Plenty of people do. They find it in uncomfortable clothing, sitting in pews, listening to some boring man read the words of people long since gone. But Nietzsche found God in beauty of music and women. That was, and that's what he talked about. So, and that's true existentialism, is making the choice of what's important to you. And that's why I love things like apophenia. It's why I call it, I get obsessed with the number 23, the whole 23 enigma. It's why I find tarot and astrology so fascinating, because those were just kind of like arbitrary things that, or maybe they're Jungian archetypes.
Mm,
There's no way to prove that, or if there is, we don't know. But it's just people staring at the stars and saying, "I think that this means this,"
yeah.
and saying it with such conviction that they worshipped it. So
Let me ask you a few questions. I want to make sure that, before we get into an 8-hour podcast, that I've asked about your music and all the other
sure,
stuff.
yeah, we maybe talk about some of the album.
Then it's all good. Everything is everything and everything is nothing. It all
That's it.
ties together. So you have a line on rules of war, ironically, rules of war. Um, if there's no blood on your hands, then the sin is not yours. I fucking love that. Not because I agree with it in
Sure.
terms of like,
Well, it's said in a somewhat facetious manner, right? Because I'm playing
100%.
the fictional character of these people that are perpetuating and starting the wars. And I believe Judy Blank, the co-writer, actually wrote that line. Uh, Next one is for, yeah, I believe Judy Blank wrote that one. But I mean, that's it, right? If you're disconnected from it, and you know, that's that's how so many people, are able to just kind of ignore what's going on, whether it be in Minneapolis or Gaza or Dachau or the Congo or Selma, Alabama. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I didn't do it. I'm not the one that's dropping the bombs or that's spraying the people. It's not me. And I'll gently distance myself from it, so it's not on my hands. A million people died because we were lied into the war in Iraq. And, people were just kind of like, yeah, that wasn't a great idea. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which ties back in that idea of intention and also knowledge, right? Because nowadays you can just turn on and off the hose however you want,
Yep.
and sometimes the hose is being forced on, forced off. I mean, I don't want to get political. That's not the point of this, but
You're a
just
little late for that. At
well,
least,
I'm not gonna go and start putting in
at least I,
flags, like
yeah.
opinions, but I remember this is just an example of this idea. I remember that we're like, wrapping up the pandemic, or at least we're a few years in, and then there was the Ukraine war started, and I remember it was almost like an instant global mindset shift where everyone was like, "COVID's done, next thing."
Yep.
And I'm not saying one is right or wrong or whatever. The whole point is
It's
it's
attention.
fascinating that
Attention.
that a global society can just say like, I'm shutting off that, and now I'm focused on the next topic. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say with this
No, I
hose of control.
yeah. No, yeah, yeah, you can, I could go down rabbit holes that would, cost me future connections with people about that too, but it is, our attention changed. Our attention was fixed on something, and then it changed, uh,
100%. So
very, very noticeably.
be intentional with what's important to you and what you're fixed on, right? Because if you're not, someone might take that attention away, or you might refocus it on, you know,
Well, that's
the
why it's
Super
probably
Bowl.
a better technique for living to focus your attention as much as you can on one, the people right next to you, not the people hundreds, thousands of miles away. And
Yeah,
two, to focus as much of your attention as you possibly can on the things that you're grateful for.
yeah,
Because the things that you're, frustrated about in this world, be they legitimate or not, and unjustice injustice is definitely something that frustrates me in this world. But if I focus too much attention on that, I really can't serve anybody. If I
100%.
focus my attention on what I'm grateful for, then I can make my world a better place. So
Gratitude.
it's just a technique. It's certainly not a moral thing. It's a technique that's worked for me. I can find more peace in it, and I mean, sometimes I break down and cry about the way this world is now. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah,
That's the thing about it is if you strengthen your attention, and then sometimes you see these news things, and especially the photographs and videos, and you just, I mean, I think you're a monster if there's something that's broken. Not you're not a monster, but there's something that's broken if you can watch some of this stuff and a tear not come to your eye. I mean, it's devastating. But then you got to pick
100%.
it up, and you got to remember that you're grateful that you have a dishwasher and a roof over your head and a mother who loves you and a wife who loves you and nieces who thinks you hang up the moon every night. You know,
Yeah.
uh, and a couple
Gra-
of guitars that are mostly in tune.
Gratitude is everything as much as forgiveness is. Those are two huge things that I really dove into more over the last couple years of my life. You said
Oh,
something.
forgiveness is a big theme on the record. Yeah, no, forgiveness is something because forgiveness is the recognition that we're all the same.
Yeah,
You forgive yourself, and then you can forgive other people because forgiving other people is forgiving yourself. Not to get too psychedelic about it, but yeah, I mean, it's it's that whole thing. It's connection and empathy, and forgiveness is the ultimate display of empathy. Is understanding that there, but for the grace of God, that could have been me.
yeah.
I could have made that mistake.
Well, so this is super important because we've talked about a lot of different things. I'm sure some things on here people might get upset about, or they might trigger something in them. But like we also reference character, and that's what I think matters. Is like you can have an opinion, you can talk about things, you can disagree with people, you can even violently disagree with someone. Doesn't mean you're a bad person just because you disagree on a topic. If anything, that means you should probably talk about it more to understand what their perspective is.
Right.
And you did lead into one of my questions, which was the last line of that song, "I deserve to be forgiven, so excuse me for
Forgive me.
forgiving myself."
So forgive me for forgiving myself.
Sorry,
No
apologies.
problem. No problem.
Misquoted.
No, no problem. No problem. When I stumble across a clever line, I want to keep it taut. Yeah. I mean that whole song, and forgive yourself. Those both were. I was meditating a lot on forgiveness, and uh, so somebody close to me had been going through some stuff where they had made a mistake. So it made me think about the mistakes I had made, and made me think about, I mean, I think at the same time I was reading some Lao Tzu, and, it's just that connection that we all have. And, I mean, you read like some Terrence McKenna and things like that. People take DMT or mescaline or whatever, and they see themselves as Genghis Khan or Hitler or something like that, and it's that universe is telling us that like we all have a little bit of those genes somewhere floating around us, and I mean, not that we should forgive people that commit mass murder or anything very easily, but we have to recognize that all life is connected as one thing.
Yeah.
And that's a tough truth to recognize when you think about the historic villains and when you think about the real live kind of monsters and villains that are out there. But those things are inside us too, and if we don't recognize them, then it makes it easier for them to creep out. It makes it
Mhm.
easier for them to, get loose from where they're probably relatively easily contained for most people. But if you let a little bit of it out, then a little bit more is right behind it. And if you let a
Yeah.
little bit more out, then a little bit more is right behind that. And if you do that over and over again, then it makes it harder for the person that you meet, that you pass that energy on to. It makes it harder for them to contain it. You don't know how close they are to letting the murderer out of the cage, or the narcissist or whatever it is, out of their own cage. And we all have things that we're a little bit better at keeping in than others, or whatever. But you got to forgive, because you are the same thing,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think that the adage, forgive but don't forget is so important because you can forgive
100%.
someone or forgive something, but that doesn't mean you have to throw it away. I also learned that forgiveness was more about myself and me than the other person because
100%.
you're letting go of whatever anger or things that you're, resentment, et cetera, that you're holding for that person, which only really hurts yourself,
That's it.
right? Like, I can be
The
so
old,
mad at that person that cut me off, but they
the
don't
old,
know, they don't care.
yeah. Well, the old analogy that holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick, you know,
Mm,
or drinking poison and trying to spit it on somebody else. Like you're going to get hurt a lot more than the person you're spitting poison at.
yeah. So
So
do me a favor and, let's go backwards now to give context or character to this entire conversation. Mississippi born and raised, traveled all around, philosophy, music, law, a stepfather who I believe is also a musician who,
father-in-law.
um, sorry, father-in-law. Yeah, so there's so much going on. I think that your initial 20 years on this rock must have been incredible.
Uh, yeah. Well, the initial 20 or so years, I really didn't understand how to use my attention, but I loved music and I wanted to play it. I was kind of a dipshit of a kid, and I thought I was a genius and all those things. And I thought that everybody should want to hear my crappy, dated, grunge sounding songs, but whatever. uh, you know, Raised in Mississippi, I was osmosically exposed to more music than I realized until later in my life. We used to go to the Jimmy Rogers Museum all the time. My grandparents and when I was a young child myself with my parents, we lived in the Delta. My granddad would take me to Clarksdale and try to explain to me how important it was, but I didn't care. I wanted to listen to rap music, so I would be walking around Clarksdale, Mississippi, listening to Slick Rick and NWA and stuff on my Sony Walkman while he's trying to explain to me who Sam Cooke and Robert Johnson and Muddy Waters are. Uh, Later in life, I figured out that there was, I mean, when you're a kid, especially when you're a kid from a place like Mississippi, I mean, the injustice is pretty much right there on the surface everywhere you go. And once you
Mm,
kind of realize that, which, back to our earlier conversation about writing history, like they didn't win, but they still wrote the history books in the Mississippi's, history books. So, we didn't really learn how evil our neighbors had acted. Uh, from Mississippi history, though there was, I mean, considerable things about the Civil War, but we would study more the battles than the reasons, if that makes any sense.
mhm,
Uh, but yeah, I mean, that's why I love scratchy, rough old recordings, because I think when I hear them, it reminds me there's a nostalgia to it. And as an adult, I've come to reconcile the Mississippi of the last 50 to 60, 70, 80, 90, 150, 200 years with the Mississippi of thousands and thousands of years, because I do think that the Mississippi River is kind of a spiritual portal that goes back a lot farther than, the English, Spanish, and French colonizers, and even a lot farther than humans and themselves.
Mhm.
Uh, but, uh, after that, moved to Nashville in '03, and again, convinced to my own brilliance, got horribly discouraged and became a bartender, and then, I don't know, it's been a wild path, with a lot of scene missings from those years.
I have a few of those same scenes missing. How did you, you know, um, go from your upbringing and music and all of that stuff to philosophy, then law?
S well, my inclination to converse even when disagreeing and to, try to understand what the other person is saying, and to think. I love to think. I mean, that led me into philosophy, physics, and neuroscience in undergrad. I was just kind of wandering and only went back to undergrad because I was bartending and I was sick of it. I just wanted to do something else. And then I ended up with a degree in philosophy, physics, and neuroscience, which my only choices there were to go back to bartending or go to some type of graduate school.
Mm.
Um, took some tests, made some applications. Again, there was a lot of scene missings in this. I like to say, I tell people sometimes I went on a 9-year bender and kind of sobered up with a law degree instead of in prison. But yeah, just, it fit. I had a good time discussing things with people in law school. I can fake my way through a round of golf. It just seemed to fit.
That's really awesome. So when did you realize along this journey that you're like, you know what? I'm gonna pick up this guitar and I'm gonna make some music.
Oh, that was early. My uncle taught me the guitar for the most part, a few chords, and tried to get me started on theory when I was like 7, 8 years old. And, I think when baseball didn't really work out for me when I was like a junior in high school, like, it was this classic story of going to a party and some pretty girls were all sitting around a guy playing horrible music on a guitar. And I was like, well, I can do better than that. Uh, But, I mean, my heroes were all songwriters too when I was growing up. My mom's record collection, I had a bunch of songwriters that I listened to there. She was big into, the band and the Beatles and the Stones and James Taylor and kind of America, that kind of thing, Crosby, Stills, Nash.
Mm.
So that got me a little bit more into it. I was always kind of like, I mean, one of my favorite things to do since I was like in fourth, fifth grade was I would go to the record stores and try to pick out the records. I had older cousins they bullied me, but they taught me, what was cool and what wasn't. They showed me hair metal and rap and stuff. And I just kind of started finding what I liked from that, and it's, and I wanted to make my own. I've always, always wanted to do that. I've
Mhm.
always loved to sing too. I mean, one of my earliest memories was singing in church. So loving songs, loving to sing, just happened that way. And just got too into Tom Waits for a few years. And now my voice is a medical condition, but it is what it is.
I mean, you might have had that early childhood experience with your mom in church and singing and then playing guitar, but your catalog is really like 2020 onwards where it starts to really appear and become prolific, you know? So what was that point in time in 2020 where you're like, "I'm doing this?"
Yeah. Well, that was, it was kind of never more yin than yang, as they say. Uh, in the pandemic, right? Like I'd been in bands. I'd put out an album. This band called Dollar McFloyd and Red Velvet Couch. We put out an album. It was a band called The Relief Effort. Worst band name ever because it happened to be both our albums came out right before giant natural disasters. So I was saved from anybody hearing those. But no, I had this record. in like 2008, before my academic bender started, I had recorded this record and I really, really, really liked it. I loved the musicianship on it. The songs were great, but I was just kind of also kind of at the edge of a little bit of a mental breaking point there. And after it got done, a couple of things happened, right? Like I couldn't find a good mix back in 2008. Nashville's a very different town as far as like studios and stuff go. And then there was an issue with the album cover, and I just kind of gave up, I just like, fuck this. Because I didn't know why I was doing it. I mean, at that point, I really didn't know why I was doing it. If I couldn't do what I wanted, nobody else was going to help me do it.
Mhm.
So I went back to school and all that. And then 2017, I moved back to Nashville after being gone for 4 years. And, just out of, you know, I mean, it was still in me, but I didn't know why, but to put out my music, but it was still in me. I reached out to a couple of people and I found somebody that would mix it the way I wanted to and master it the way I wanted to. We could only find 5 of the 10 songs as far as like the, original recordings go. And my friend David Knoll, he and I talked. He's a brilliant artist and he painted the album cover that eventually became it. And I was just this was like 2019. I was getting it all wrapped up and finished and trying to figure out what to do with it. And yeah, I was just gonna print out like 100 vinyls because I'd never put anything on vinyl. I was gonna release it on the streaming stuff because I used that at that point then.
Yep.
And I was just gonna drop it off at the side of the road and get back to work. And then the pandemic happened, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at all these people, thousands of people dying, and thinking to myself, I mean, how many of those people didn't do what they felt compelled to do, and why do I feel compelled to do that? We all had a lot more time to think then. Um, and I kind of realized that the reason I felt compelled to do it was because it was important, not because I was going to be famous or make money or even be recognized or anything. None of the ego reasons. I mean, at this point in my life, between 2008 and 2020, I had begun to study Eastern philosophy and realized where my ego was getting in the way, but I'd never
Mhm.
really applied that to music. But at the same time, when that album came out in June of 2020, something like that, everybody was canceling tours and canceling album releases. So it actually got some good press. And it was like, okay, well, if you are going to do this, you got to do it now. Right. Like you're not gonna slack on this and pause this again. Like it's if you're gonna do this because it's important, because you understand why you need to do this, then you got to do it now. So we recorded Kings for Sale and it's done okay, and then it's just kind of been off from there. Uh,
Yeah.
but it was definitely kind of a the yang of the COVID thing is, you know, it was a
So
reaction.
you found yourself with opportunity and time, and you took a chance, and you just dove in head first.
Basically, yeah. Yeah.
When I when I listen to your music, I got a couple of questions, and then I'm happy to wrap up. But when I listen to your music, obviously your influences are stated. We got Leonard Cohen, Tom Waits, Elvis Costello, even Oscar Wilde in there. Um, I think of this cool moment in my life where I was at this, small bar in downtown Toronto on a artsy street, which is probably less artsy and more mainstream now.
Sure.
But it was like, it smelled like smoke and beer on the floor, like sticky. And this guy named Kevin Quain was performing an album, his first album, I think, called Hangover Honeymoon. And it was just this very much like Tom Waits
Yeah.
vibe. And your music gives me that memory and that feeling and that vibe. Is any of it created, or is it all organically and authentically you from your influences and upbringing, and it just comes out that way?
Uh, well, one, on top of the reasons why, like, I think I've learned a lot about that question. And, I now find it an advantageous thing to think of songwriting as discovery. I mean, I think that I have a certain perspective, certainly because of the way I was raised, certainly because of the influences I've had. But again, there are plenty of people the exact same. I don't know. It's just where you are in the river, where the flowers are in the meadow, where the gold is in the mountain. If you happen to be next to it and you're able to see it, and you can pull it out and you can craft it into something like a bouquet or a ring or a necklace or whatever, then that's a song. Uh, so I mean, I think that eases the sting of criticism when you don't you know prescribe the song so much to your own ego, but just to something that like I'm finding and sharing. And if you don't care for it, then that's fine.
Yeah.
But so I mean, I think that it's a combination of all those things. I mean, I don't think anybody else can find exactly what I can find in that realm, spirit world, the Tao, whatever you want to call it. Uh, but I think that I find things near the people that I listen to. I mean, I think that I inevitably walk around in the meadows that Tom Waits has picked his flowers from, or that Sam Cooke has picked his flowers from, or Leonard Cohen or Mark Lanigan or, Fiona Apple or Bjork. Like those are the people whose meadows I like a lot. I think that sometimes somebody slaps my hand and says, you just can't have those. Those aren't for you. You got to go look at Elvis Costello's. But, I still think they're pretty, and I'm more likely to create a thing that resembles what I thought was beautiful before.
That makes perfect sense. Drawing on inspirations unintentionally because that's what you love and what feels right to you. But then your universal experience, putting what you see on top of that is
Right,
kind of the creation that comes out.
right.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
two things. One is it was a quote, and it was again in one of the piece of literature that I got from your publicist. And it was about you talking about a song that your father-in-law did, L.H. Halliburton. Is that
Yeah,
right? Halliburton.
that's him, yeah.
And the quote is the realization that just because things haven't been perfect early in life, there's still more life to live. And the seeds that have been planted by love, hard work, and determination can still pay off in the fall when the
Yeah,
harvest comes in. I love that. It's
yeah.
such a strong idea, and it's not easy to live life with gratitude and happiness now and know that there's so much hard work and time before something may or may not pay off. Talk to me about that idea.
Well, I mean, that's why I mean, that song, Harvest, was the main catalyst other than, kissing up to my in-laws and, getting a little bit extra on Thanksgiving dinner. But that song was really the catalyst, for me recording his songs. I thought it was so beautiful. He, he's older. I'm older. He's a little older than me, but I mean, I'm still older too. And there's something about kind of looking back at life and being like, you know what, that wasn't the springtime of my life wasn't really as great because I didn't have. I mean, it was still great, but it's not as good as it is now because now I have the wisdom and the ability to reflect on how grateful I am, that I
Mhm.
had that springtime and that I have what I have now, so that's kind of the way I thought of it. I mean, but it's art. So, I think anybody can find what they need to out of it. Um, but that's what I found was, wasn't, it was kind of an embracing kind of the latter stages of life. I'm relatively early in those latter stages, but if I live to be 94, that'll be pretty fucking impressive. So I got to think I'm on the back end, whatever. You just got to embrace it, right? Spring and
Yeah.
summertime are great, but fall's beautiful too, and winter's necessary. Comes for every leaf.
So that succinctly takes us to the end of the tale. Tomorrow is the beginning of the 13th month, some might say, right? The
That's
the
right.
new
So
sign.
you're the horse now. Yeah, I love that. I'm so glad you told me that, man. That's great.
So the 13th month, your album, New Beginnings, there's this last line in one of the bios. And I don't know if it was you or if the publicist wrote it, but I loved it.
No telling.
Convention is a construct, evolution is reinvention.
That's I think that's all. I think that's wholly Rob, but I certainly agree with it. And if I inspired somebody as cool as Rob to write that, then I'll take a little bit of credit for it. But yeah, I mean, conventions are, I don't know, constructions, fictions, boundaries, and those are good sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, as somebody who loves blues and country music, I love conventions. But I also like reinventing. I've reinvented myself plenty of times, and I think this album and my music is I mean, I have a habit of not having any 2 songs that really sound much alike other than me yelling at people. So I do like to reinvent, tango, country, blues, grunge, whatever the case may be, in a way that from this unique perspective that I am blessed with.
Evolution is reinvention. We talked about 13. We talked about this transition into the year of the horse. Your album, specifically the 13th zodiac. Um, Talk to me about reinvention and evolution and what it all means to you and where you go from here.
Whew. Well, right now I'm resting. That was a gigantic undertaking, and as an independent musician, artist, record label, booker, tour manager, whatever. I mean, I did all of that, and I did it more last year than I had done it in 20 years before.
Mhm.
And I'm not hanging myself up on anything as a martyr, but it was tough. And right now I'm resting. I've got a couple of festivals. I played one in January. I'm doing Mile of Music in July. I've got a few out of town house shows along with smattering of in Nashville things, which there's never any shortage of. But I'm really looking forward this year to kind of refilling the tank, both not both, but in all manners, mentally, physically, psychologically, musically, going to see more shows again, and financially, putting out a record by yourself ain't cheap, and the
Yeah,
touring ain't cheap. If I was doing it to make money, I would have a problem at this point. But uh, but what the next thing. I don't know. I recorded some stuff live last year. At the fallout shelter, and that might be coming out this spring digitally. And I'm sure I'll get back into the studio, but I really don't have any idea when. I've got to see, I mean, and it's got to be some kind of concept. I've got to
yeah,
have, I've got to have a good why. And right now I don't, and I just put that record out, and I'm just, and I also believe that rest is service to the ones you love. And, when your tank is empty, you're not you gotta rest, or you're letting other people that are counting on you down, so
100%. That's that self-awareness, right? That's that ability to know that to help others, you got to put on your own oxygen mask. And if you don't, then you burn out and you're of no use to anyone. So good
you're
for
nope.
you.
Yeah, they can't help can't serve from an empty vessel, I believe is the proverb or whatnot, so yeah,
I
I'm gonna try to do my service by resting, but I'm still gonna sing at people and drive around the country, maybe not quite as much as I did last year, but still plenty, maybe
good.
some new places.
Well, your music and your art is spectacular. You need to keep it going. I'm sure that if we cross paths, a nice cold beer or a beautifully iced whiskey will result in hours of pontificating.
Oh, yeah, this has gone on for a lot longer, man, yeah, for sure, and yeah,
I'm
both of those things will make me pontificate even longer, so yeah.
Afton, I'm really grateful for your time. I'm happy that we got connected and we got to chat a little bit today, share some ideas. Do me a favor and wrap us up. Give us some, important life advice that the audience must take away with them.
Whew, wow, I wish you'd given me a chance to load this one up. I'm usually so good with these, but, let's see.
We shoot from the hip around here.
Fight. Don't pick a fight, but always know where the door is. How about that one? A little bartender knowledge for you.